Well, for those of you who have been living under a rock the last couple of weeks, Nintendo is raising the price of the Switch 2 by $50, which is actually small when you compare it to price increases of other consoles. But why does this keep happening? Usually at this time in a console cycle, two things are going on. Either A, we are getting a super version of the console with more game storage than anyone could possibly need, and a wide range of other updates, or B, we are getting a price cut. Instead, we see prices going up while we're getting less. So what's the reason behind it? Well, in this video, I want to talk about the reasons behind these increases and what's going on in the market. Two reasons for the increase. First reasons are tariffs are going up all over the world, which do increase prices. I'm not going to get into it too much here because this is a bit political. I'm a bit of a small government libertarian. I do believe that taxes and tariffs exist and serve a purpose for giving the government money, but you don't want them to be too high for too long because you end up earning less and causing more damage to the economy and people's livelihoods than helping them. In the case of tariffs, it's important to understand that computer components consist of several materials found all over the world, and manufacturers sometimes in multiple places. When there's a barrier to trade in obtaining the components needed to manufacture them, prices go up. With that said, I think the trade war is going to cool down eventually. What's unfortunately going to stay high, though, are RAM prices. So, what is RAM? I think 99% of the viewers watching this video know what RAM is. If you're a gamer, you have probably heard the term. But for the few of you who are not well educated, here's how it works. Your computer or game console cannot load the entire game onto the processor at once. It's too much for it to go through. It's got to be fed a few things at a time. At the same time, getting your data from the hard drive takes too long, especially if it's an old-fashioned spinning hard disk drive. If it did that, then playing your game, even on the system hardware itself, would be like playing a cloud-based game on a 56K dial-up connection. It wouldn't be pretty. So it dumps the game and its components into RAM chips that contain memory for the processor to use and quickly grab as you play. And the thing, RAM's been cheap for decades and it hasn't been really increasing in quantity all that much for the last decade. It's gotten more efficient in how quickly it can feed the data off the disk and into the processor. And that's what the DDR4 and DDR5 is that you see on RAM chips. But the amount that it can hold has stayed pretty static between 8 gigabits to 32 gigabits, depending on if it's just a workstation for data input or if it's a gaming media machine, and it's been that way probably for the last decade. Because of this, RAM was cheap for decades, and when Nintendo was planning its Switch 2 consoles, its price was probably enough to give Nintendo a nice juicy profit. So what happened? Well, probably about the same time Nintendo started developing their Switch 2 console, ChatGPT came out, which is called a large language model. Basically a computer program that can understand human speech. You can write on it like you're chatting with a person and boom, it produces outputs. And it's a very handy tool. Other LLMs have been created, Grok, Microsoft Copilot, and Google Gemini, for example. And these are useful tools, guys. I personally see these tools as things that will help small businesses as well as large businesses, as the resource gap is now shrinking, as even my small channel, which is not monetized, can now do research, create thumbnails, get my audio cleaned up, and create animation for the cost of a couple of bucks a month compared to what it would cost to hire an entire team out. The problem is, if you're running that many computer computations, you're going to need a lot of the RAM. And the RAM manufacturers have met this demand by creating the RAM needed for the data centers because, well, these data centers are willing to pay the RAM manufacturers out the wazoo for their components. The problem is that this means there aren't enough components for us on the consumer end for our computers, cell phones, and game consoles, meaning huge price increases for the foreseeable future. and it does create a paradox. In order for the AI to be useful, the consumers have to be able to use it. If the consumers can't afford the RAM to run the AI programs on their hardware, then all those data centers are not going to be useful. Eventually, this entire situation is going to collapse. So I do see three possible futures. Let's discuss them and what their endings are. The first, and I fear the most inevitable one, is the memory wars continue and the paradox of consumers needing the electronics and not being able to afford them, plus the AI not being everything that the tech bros say it does. I use a lot of it, and I can personally say this: AI can stand for artificial idiot too. You have to be careful what it's doing and what's going on, because if you're not paying attention and it hallucinates, it can destroy whatever project you're working on real fast if you don't catch it. At any rate, the increased cost of it, it's eventually going to create a bubble, and then that bubble's going to pop big time. I say out of all possibilities, this is the worst and unfortunately the most likely to happen. Now, I know a lot of people are out there hoping that this happens, and don't get me wrong, I can understand the frustrations with the prices. However, if you're in that camp, I want to let you know what you're doing is praying for world peace through nuclear Armageddon. It's not going to end up the way you're thinking. Okay, no more ChatGPT and my RAM prices are now $100 again, right? Wrong! Switching back the production to consumer RAM modules would take months, and the contract these people have signed and are developing are worth billions with a B. To lose hundreds of billions of dollars from the world economy all at once would mean a major recession. It would mean that these RAM producers would more than likely go out of business. So not only would you not get the cheap RAM, you would also have a lot of people out of a job, including probably you. It's not an ideal thing to wish for or to want to happen. Even if some of the idiotic things these tech bros like to say or think their creations can do, which is absolute garbage, and you would pay a lot of real damn money just to have them shut up, it's not worth the recession that would happen, especially when there are two other alternatives. The second one I do hope happens and ends up fixing most of our problems, and that is we find a way to make things more efficient so we don't need as much RAM to run the data centers and free it up. Basically, I believe Google is working on ways to make their data centers more efficient to make sure they take up less RAM and resources to run them. This means more resources can be kept on the market, hoping to keep the costs down somewhat. This one's a Hail Mary pass because sometimes with greater efficiency comes greater demand, and then there goes your savings. But needless to say, one of the things programmers will have to do is work with less memory and try to do more things with it, at least for the next couple of years. The last one is the one I hope for the most, but it's also the biggest unicorn out there. The answer is wet computing. Basically growing human neurons onto a silicon chip, and then you're going to throw electricity through the chip, kind of like how a human brain does with its neurons. No need for RAM, you can grow them in a lab, and they can do more than what a typical RAM chip does. It would be the greatest thing in networking since the fiber optic cable. Unfortunately, this one is still in the early testing phases, and it will be years before it can come online and really start running the data centers, and it would be a great replacement for the RAM, ending this issue once and for all. With that said, just hearing what this does, I have to wonder if we need to keep Space Bounty Hunter Samus Aran on standby, just in case the shit hits the fan and we need her help. At any rate, let me know what your guys' thoughts are on all of this in the comments down below. You guys have a wonderful day, and please leave a like and subscribe. Tommy the Game Master signing out.